Every one of you, I'm sure, has been asked the question, where are you from? While we can all say that we are either from Las Vegas or somewhere else, we all share in coming from one place, the past. That past makes you and I the sum total of our ancestors. Have you thought about your ancestors lately? I had not really thought about my ancestors until the day that I was unwittingly reminded of one. It was the day that I stood by my computer, cradling in my hands the ship's manifest my wife had just printed, staring at the signature of Louis Bernstein. I never knew my paternal grandfather, but was nevertheless mesmerized by the historical document, seeing that his Russian freighter had landed in New York in 1906. It also came as a surprise to me that on the manifest, he had listed his occupation as a bootmaker. His description of himself as a bootmaker touched a chord in me. Bootmaker. It seemed more elevated than my parents' label of him as a shoemaker. Because of the label shoemaker, I used to visualize my grandfather in a small storefront on the Lower East Side of Manhattan with dirty shoe nails in his mouth, pounding at the soles of shoes. I later learned that because he constantly held those dirty shoe nails in his mouth, my grandfather died of tuberculosis in or around 1923. He was about 37 years old. My emotions were running high about my grandfather when I heard a voice. I was a bootmaker who made the shoes people wore on the streets of New York. I tailored their personalities with my shoes. Hearing my grandfather's voice jolted my memory to flash back over my life as if a giant movie screen were playing in my mind's eye. Wait a minute, what's this about? I could see my Buster Brown baby shoes, my Keds high tops, my high school graduation shoes, my 70s platform shoes, and my 80s Reebok tennis shoes. This was the earliest recollection I have of a deep regard and affinity for shoes. The movie continued with my memory zeroing in on 1963, when I saw a fellow junior high school student wearing a pair of fawn-colored suede desert boots. To me, those desert boots were the coolest shoes I had ever seen. I had to have a pair. I remember doing little odd jobs, saving up enough to buy a pair of those desert boots. And did I think I was in? I had arrived. All of a sudden, the early 60s came alive, and I found myself listening to Peter, Paul, and Mary, singing Bob Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone, growing longer hair, and trying to be hip. This is the earliest recollection I have of a deep regard and affinity for shoes. And it was a very, very deep regard. The movie continued to 1968, when those suede desert boots were replaced by a pair of shiny Cordovan floor shine shoes. Hey, Dad, you want to see the new shoes I bought? I spent $29 on them. I know that's a lot of money, Dad. All I knew was that when I put those pair of shoes on, I felt like the man. The next day, those shiny pair of shoes boosted my confidence level as I paraded around my high school with them. As those beautiful Cordovan shoes faded from my memory, I took another look at the ship's manifest and was reminded by my grandfather's profession that I had come from humble roots. Unfortunately, I just couldn't accept that he was a simple cobbler. Oh no, Not me. I was better than that. Couldn't he have been a famous politician or maybe even a movie mogul? All of a sudden, the movie abruptly stopped and took a sharp detour. As all these thoughts, and as I was digesting all these thoughts about Louis Bernstein, I had an incredible revelation. All my life, I had been behaving just like my grandfather had in creating beautiful shoes for others by enjoying and caring for my own shoes. My grandson, you are the new bootmaker in the family. As I heard my grandfather's voice, I couldn't help it. I needed to look in a mirror. As I turned and I saw my reflection, I looked at myself and I heard myself whisper, maybe he looked something like that. It was almost as if I was looking at somebody else. Transfixed. One thought flooded my reality. In my time, today, I also am a cobbler. Not of shoes, but of the spoken word. There was something, though, that still bothered me about the word cobbler. So I took another look at its meaning and learned that it also meant craftsman. Could I have misunderstood who and what my grandfather was? The answer to that question was a resounding yes. I then knew that I had to forgive my grandfather, myself, and my so-called humble roots. What about you and your ancestry? How are you perceiving them today? If you want to appreciate more about who you are, take another look at your ancestry. Perhaps you will take a page out of my book, the page that ends this story with me putting the ship's manifest away in a safe place, a place where I could return over and over again to be reminded that I am the living continuation of a proud craftsman. Mr. Toastmaster.